Welcome back, everybody. John Aravosis here with Cliff Schechter and our special guest, Kurt Bardella. Kurt, you guys probably recognize from TV, if you don't. He is a MSNBC and USA Today contributor, former Republican who now turned Democrat, actually a little bit of a while now. And he worked at the House Oversight Committee for Republicans for years. I'm a former Republican.
With Daryl Issa, I believe. So
oh my God, you were. Right. I was going to ask you were with Issa.
That is quite a transformation.
Yeah, so Kurt really could. Well, no, but I always find that very interesting. And I think we could even start with this maybe a quick second about, your transformation. We can get into more later, but then I think we wanted to start talking about Biden's speech that just happened. That was tremendous. And anybody listening today, please go and Google the speech. It
was really powerful. Probably
good. But Kurt,
I think Kurt actually, to start with it, I just saw Kurt's tweet where he said, today's the day that Joe Biden became president, which I think is about right.
That's how I, came away of thinking. As expected, Vice President Biden struck the right tone, said the right things, talked about unity in the wake of the divisiveness that President Trump is really sowing throughout the country. And it was made even more powerful by what we saw yesterday from Donald Trump in that pathetic display of, I don't even know what you call it, to be quite. I mean, it was just embarrassing for Trump, for our country. And I was so heartened to see a return of decency and of a human being. And the thing that makes Biden so powerful, I've always felt, is that this is someone who has lived through a lot of grief in his life, which he touched on. This being the 5th anniversary of his son's death, who lost his battle with cancer. Biden's life, as much success as he's had politically, has been interwoven with personal tragedy. Yeah. And in a time like this, with what we're seeing unfold in this country, I think that the people need a leader that they can relate to on some level.
Right.
And no matter what you believe politically, right, left, conservative, liberal, Republican, and Democrat, I think that anyone who has watched Joe Biden throughout his career, and certainly anybody who saw his speech today, believes that this is someone who actually believes what he says, that he is authentic. He's not trying or pretending to be the consoler-in-chief, the healer-in-chief.
I don't think he could help himself if he wanted to.
I mean, this is just who he is. He has a natural empathy that derives from the things that he's experienced in his own life, and that really comes across when he gives a speech like that. And you contrast that to the insanity that we saw unfold yesterday, which I still don't even know what to. There are no words to aptly describe what yesterday was, other than the rantings of a lunatic sociopath who is completely unfit to serve in the office that he holds.
I was trying to find the words too, and especially the clearing of people out of the way like they were sheep, for a photo op.
On American soil.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to make one. I was telling Cliff before the show about this. As somebody who, I consider myself an agnostic, I guess. I was raised Greek Orthodox. I'm still not totally atheist, so I'm still not in the religion is the spaghetti monster zone yet. But agnostic is a good word for me. I don't go to church. I saw Trump doing that. And one of the things that hit me, as a Christian watching it was, if you're going to be totally obnoxious about this and just say, I'm going to a freaking church and I'm going to hold a Bible up and I'm going to throw it in these Democrats and these blacks and these everybody else's faces to say, you tried to burn this church last night. If I'm, this as a former Republican too, first of all, part of you is going to legitimately be pissed off that the church was set on fire the night before. Part of you is going to be so opportunistic, you're going to say, do you know what they did to this church? But it still stands. The Democrats couldn't burn it down. And holding the Bible, you're going to mention the Bible. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to pray because it's going to be great TV. He didn't do any of that.
He can't even pull that off.
But Cliff, and the reason, and Kurt, I'll throw it back to you. The reason he couldn't do any of that is because he doesn't believe in any of this stuff. He doesn't care about the church. He doesn't care about Christianity. He doesn't care about the Bible. It didn't even hit him to say a prayer, to mention that the reason you're at the church is it was on fire the night before. Like, it freaked a lot of us out in D.C. I don't know how long you've lived here, Kurt, but that church is really famous, for all the presidents but Trump going there. And it was another sort of layer to just how conniving
just
and
what a fraud
soulless
he is.
And fraud. Yeah, how soulless he is.
Well, I think it also shows that the little regard he actually has for people of faith, and that he thinks that he can con them into believing that he is some kind of Christian. When it was so painfully obvious just by everything, his demeanor, his words, the embarrassing photo op with the Bible.
And not even mentioning the Bible.
He can't even hold the Bible.
He just held it up there.
Has he ever held
he was holding it
before?
like it was burning him. He was holding corners. I mean,
I need to drop it.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was actually one of the more effective lines from Biden's speech was, rather than hold it up, maybe it would serve him well to read it and actually look at what's in the Bible, because it's clear that Donald Trump has never done that. And just I think the cynicism of trying to use the church as such a prop, it's insulting.
But hasn't it worked for him? Let me interrupt you, though. Hasn't it worked? Clearly, the religious right has bought in. We've all seen the pictures of the crazy evangelical leaders all holding their hands on Trump's shoulder and closing their eyes as if he's like really, he's sitting there in his head going, "Get your hands off of me." I mean, he's con.
But can I jump in for a sec, John?
Yeah.
I would say that's not because of photo ops in front of churches. That's not because they believe he believes. It's because he hates the right people. And he's shown the frauds that they are. I mean, there are true evangelicals. There's the one from the really big evangelical publication, the most famous one, who stepped down and said, I can no longer work here because I actually an evangelical, and supporting Trump is horrifying. But you have these second generation or third generation of little preacher babies, the Falwells and, and others who are complete corrupt frauds. And so they don't care. It has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with control. It has to do with money. It has to do, I mean, that's I'll throw it to Kurt.
My point is, I worry that these photo ops help him in that regard with the crazies. Because he got a picture in front of a church. Look at Trump holding a Bible.
But he's got them already.
And the thing is, it's like, and when it comes to the crazies, I don't care. Like, they're going to vote how they're going to vote. We all know that. That's not going to change anything. What Trump is doing, though, by appealing only to the crazies, is cutting himself off from everybody else. And for every crazy voter that he holds on to, he's losing a voter that he's actually going to need to win the next election. I mean, for all the talk about 2020 and all of the talk about 2016, lost in the conversation is always the fact that we had an election in 2018. And it was an overwhelming repudiation of Donald Trump, the Republican Party. 40 Republican seats became Democrat seats, places that haven't seen a Democrat in office in places like Southern California ever.
Yeah, Orange County.
Went to the Democratic Party. The district that my former boss, Darrell Issa, used to represent is now held by a Democrat.
Right.
So, and this is a district that we routinely won by double digits without even having to, frankly, run a campaign, in the last decade. So that just tells you that Trump is so fixated, I think, on 2016 that he and his allies completely have missed the lessons of the 2018 midterm elections, have refused to recalibrate it all. Instead of trying to expand and try to grow his voting coalition, he's actually narrowed it and made it even smaller. And that is just not a recipe for electoral success. You look at the group of voters that were so important and meaningful for him to win in 2016 against Hillary Clinton: suburban voters, women voters, college
over
educated
65
voters.
Even he's hemorrhaging.
And he is upside down in every single one of those demographics. And when he does what he did yesterday, that does not help him there. I think that yesterday was the beginning of the end of his presidency.
You know what my theory is too, John? I'll say quickly. Came out, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, one of these places, reported, of course, that he's consulting with Karl Rove because, of course, right? Rove is one back in the game forever. And, Rove, as a young guy, his first campaign, I believe, was the Nixon re-election in 1972, which was all about law and order. And, these blacks in the city are terrible and they're destroying everything. And, racism throughout. And I would say that the thing is about Karl Rove, which he was bestowed this genius who actually almost found a way to lose 2000 because he was obsessed with being in California instead of in Iowa the last couple. I go on about Rove and the supposed genius. The thing is that It seems that I believe Rove has told him this, and he's trying to run a rerun of 1972. The problem is that the liberal, the suburbs, the inner suburbs are much more liberal. The people who are showing up at these rallies are much more mixed race as opposed to 1968 and those times when it was almost 90% plus African American. We're just not the same country anymore. And
not at all.
And that's the problem. So my guess is that whole Bible thing is all about a Karl Rove type play of that's how you win back voters in the suburbs. That's how you win back voters over 65. You're losing because frankly, they know that you'd let them die for the economy with coronavirus. And I don't think it's going to work. We're a different country. That's my feeling.
I agree with you. I think that, again, running, and Trump is a man that's trapped in a different time in many ways from what we've seen. He's never gotten past the point where we in our country did, integration and where we expanded the women's role from being more than just a secretary or outside of the kitchen. He's trapped in a year era gone by. If Donald Trump wants to put his reelection chances on the back of Karl Rove, God bless, good, because he'll lose. Running a campaign as if it's 1972 in 2020 is a recipe for failure. It is a completely different country when you look at. The reality is, in 15 years, we're going to be a minority country in America, and we are more diverse than ever before. And that to know how this story ends, all you have to do is look at what actually happened to the California Republican Party.
Right.
In the mid-'90s, the Republican Party in California was thriving. They had a majority in state legislature. They had a Republican governor, Republicans in statewide offices. And just 2 decades later, they're pretty much extinct. Not a single Republican in statewide office. Most of the time, they can even field a Republican to run. Democrats have a super majority, a veto-proof majority in state legislature. The congressional districts have pretty much all flipped to being a Democrat. And you look at
and the ones that were gerrymandered too, because they figured they could always hold the suburbs, right?
Right. And it's like you look at everything that the Republican Party in California has done to get them to where they are now. And basically, it is a third party. It is behind Democrats and decline to states and independents in the state of California voter registration. And they embraced a xenophobic agenda, targeted Hispanics, began running to the extreme right, and a couple election cycles of doing that, and they've now put themselves into an irrelevant position. That is where I believe the Republican Party nationally is headed by embracing this radical, extreme Trump agenda. It might have gotten them some success temporarily, but the damage to the Republican Party will be felt long after Donald Trump is out of office.
That's such a smart point, too. I'll just quickly say, because Orange County was once literally almost the center of the Republican Party. It produced Nixon, it produced Reagan, it produced Pete Wilson, who was going to be potentially a national figure, and now, because people think of California now, they think of how liberal it is, and they don't realize that a lot of that's because, yes, the states moved to the left, but also the Republican Party's moved so far to the right that, and that, I think that metaphor for the country as a whole is right on.
My sort of take on this, and then we're going to do a quick ad break, but just for a quick second. I hope you two are right. Both of you are a little more optimistic than I am. My fear is twofold with what's going on right now. One, we've taken the coronavirus is now out of the picture for now. Now, the virus isn't going away, so it's clearly going to come back in the news at some point. So Trump can't just make it go away forever in terms of a news story showing how incompetent he is, right? That's the good. I don't want to say the good side. It certainly isn't the good side that it's coming back. But he clearly can't get rid of the story forever, but it does benefit him to get rid of it now. Secondly, I worry about, you take protests of liberals and you try to scare people that, those scary liberals, look at them marching in your cities. Then you take the fact that we have had a lot of looting nationwide. And I don't think they're the protesters, but nonetheless, you've got those images. And it's, as knowing my Republican playbook, I say, Trump is sitting there and Karl Rove and all the rest of them, Brad Parscale, are salivating that they're getting these images on TV they can use. And I fear when you start to scare the American people with violence and then throw in a racist argument in there, I get a little worried as I'm not sure what's coming next in terms of how voters are going to take it. I don't know. If you want to answer really quick, Kurt, on that, then we'll do a really quick break and then we can continue.
I hear what you're saying. and there is some logic to that, because we've seen in the past it's worked. Fear has worked for the Republican Party. I mean, if you could brand the Republican Party in one word, it is the word fear. I just don't believe, based on what we saw in 2018, that that's going to work right now. And I think that more than anything, people are just tired of all the noise.
Yeah.
And no matter what you believe ideologically, I think that there is a fatigue factor when it comes to Trump. And a lot of people think, well, we tried that. We thought blowing up, bringing in the outsider, that would shake everything up and it would be great. Turns out it won't, because at the end of the day, no matter what is in the news cycle, tens of millions of Americans are out of work right now, not getting a paycheck. And when that's the case, that's the case for change. And I think that will play heavily by the time we get to November.
Which should we start with? I mean, should we, I guess, Kurt, that is true. Let's talk a little bit about what happened. I mean, Darrell Issa, for folks who don't know, that's pretty far right. I mean, as far as pretty conservative member of Congress, or was. What happened? What was your epiphany?
It's always interesting when I hear people characterize Darrell as this far right, because I've always looked at him, when you actually look at his record, it's anything but that. Now, more recently in the Trump era, he has adopted far-right extremist, insane rhetoric, just as the entire Republican Party has. But before that, this is a guy who came out for comprehensive immigration reform. This is a guy who came out who was for gay rights. Someone who being from
what was he doing on gay rights? I had no clue. What was he supportive of?
He was against whatever the initiative was that was trying to define marriage as only between a man and a woman. He was up in California at the time.
Wow.
He came out against that.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know.
He also was good on, I think he was a much more, let's at least call it moderate, right, on Arab-Israeli relations because of his background.
Oh, very much so, being Lebanese,
right.
Yeah. And so the idea that Darrell was this ideologue is actually, I've always felt, inaccurate. What he was a fierce partisan. Okay. And people interpreted his role as the head of oversight and government reform, doing all these investigations as somehow that is an ideology. That has nothing to do with being conservative,
it's opportunism,
or
right?
liberal.
No, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
It's being a partisan,
right?
Which he was a fierce one. Right. Not saying that's good or bad, but that's what it was.
Okay, take us back to you again now. So, I mean, fair enough on the correction. So, what happened for you?
Well, for me, I a couple of things. Number one, the rise of Trumpism in the 2016 campaign was disturbing. I mean, again, when you have someone literally calling Mexicans drug dealers and rapists, when he's attacking reporters who have a disability, when he is seeing this, sowing these seeds of hate and blatant racism. I don't care what you think about taxes or jobs or the healthcare system. Like, once you kind of go there, I don't want to be a part of that.
Right.
And as I watch the Republican Party fall in line behind that and not speak out against it and not do anything meaningful to protest this incendiary, dangerous rhetoric, that was a real eye-opening thing to see. And so I made the decision that this was a party that I no longer wanted to be affiliated with. And so I made the decision in early 2016 that I was going to support Hillary Clinton for president, which was as someone who spent a good amount of time, being a part of the committee that was investigating the State Department.
Where were you working? Like, in other words, were you still? I know, it's awesome. Were you still in Republican politics at that point because that must have been an awkward sort of announcement.
Benghazi!
I had
Fast and Furious. Oh, but I'm for Hillary.
I had started transitioning more into the role of political commentator. Part of what I decided was important from a credibility standpoint was to put myself in a place where I wasn't taking anyone's money that was in the political space, where I could be free to say what I felt without having worrying about who was paying my bills. Right. And everybody that so many people that are a part of the that you see on TV that are consultants, like everybody answers to somebody.
That's true.
And so you have to always calibrate the sincerity of what they're saying based on how it affects their interests and their bottom line. And for me to be able to go out there and say, I'm not bought and paid for by anybody. I'm not taking anybody's money right now. So what I say is what I believe, and I'm backing that up by not taking anyone's money. which was probably financially and professionally a stupid thing to do, but that's where I was at.
Welcome to the left, Kurt.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't get rich.
Even if you want to take people's money, we don't have it.
That's right.
Right.
So
good luck taking money.
That I think gave me more credibility to be able to speak out and get the type of opportunities that I've had. And then as we just,
can I ask something quickly? I don't want to cut you, but you were at Breitbart as a spokesperson, right? Isn't that correct?
They were one of my clients. I was consulting for them.
It's a client, because I felt like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I felt like when that whole Corey Lewandowski thing went down, you spoke out.
Yeah, that was really that was kind of the igniter of it all for me, because I felt like I was being put in a position where I was going to have to lie.
Well, wait, tell
to
people
protect Corey Lewandowski.
Tell people what happened really.
So Corey was a campaign manager for the Trump campaign at this time, and he got into a physical altercation with one of Breitbart's own reporters, Michelle Fields, where he grabbed her. And of course, they fiercely denied that it happened. Michelle had bruises on her arm, so it did happen. The videotape corroborated that it did happen, and yet Breitbart was undermining her. And for me, just as a professional, like, you want me to go out there and try to sell everyone that you take this seriously and that you're going to support your own reporter, but really what you're doing is undermining her every step of the way.
I didn't remember she actually had bruises on her arm.
Yeah,
I didn't remember that. Wow.
And so
assaulted her.
That like a day or two later, I just made the decision to quit. I said, you know what, I'm no longer going to represent you. This isn't for me. And that was that.
That's when I first saw your name. That was when I first noticed. I remember when I saw that you had done that. I'm like, wow, somebody who's been a Republican for a long time is actually speaking out and doing the right thing. I mean, that was a very cool moment. We had a few of them during that campaign, not enough.
Yep.
Yeah, and so that was. I'll never understand this. Breitbart decides to attack me, and put out this narrative that I'm a terrible PR person for bailing on them in their time of need. My approach was, our working relationship is over and I'm moving on, and you can move on, and I wasn't going to talk about you. But when you start attacking me, well, okay, now I have to defend myself. And so that night, I made my first appearance ever on CNN with Don Lemon. And Don asked me point blank, so is Breitbart lying when they're saying that they're standing behind the reporter? And I just said, yep, they're lying. And Don goes quiet for like 15 seconds. And I'm thinking something's wrong with the audio. Like maybe I'm just like, I wasn't sure. I was very new at TV at this point.
Hello, Don.
And Don finally says, I'm sorry. People generally don't just come out here and just tell the truth.
I know, they're like, you just were honest? What, this is TV.
Yeah.
Come on.
And so, and that moment went viral, and I became a regular on Don's show at that point in time, and started, just talking about what was going on, because no matter, again, what side of the aisle you're on, I've always felt that there was some fundamental misunderstandings about how the right operates and what motivates them, and how they weaponize what they do, and how Democrats, frankly, are really bad at dealing with that.
Yep.
And never imagining that Trump would become the nominee, that then he would win, that Steve Bannon would become his right-hand guy. It's like all of these things kept happening, where the only person who had actually had firsthand experience with these people who could talk about it honestly was me. And so kind of this unlikely, career in political commentating began through that.
Right.
And at the same time, for the first time, I was having conversations with Democrats about issues that I frankly had never really thought about before. Like, shocking as this may be, Republicans don't sit around and talk about gun reform or climate change or social inequality or any of the issues that we hear about so much now. They just never really came up in my life. And so I never really thought about them, had an informed opinion one way or the other about them. And as I began talking to people more and exploring those issues, I found myself on the side of the Democrats on a lot of issues. Right. And finally, one day, my wife says, on like 99% of the issues out there, you're a Democrat. You should just kind of call yourself that. And so abiding to her wisdom, as she is much smarter than I am, certainly, I made the formal announcement or wrote in a USA Today column that I was going to become a Democrat.
Let me ask you, because as a former Republican, I wanted to ask you basically on why more Republicans aren't speaking out and whether you've been surprised. What has really bothered me has been particularly on national security, which is something that, my views haven't changed that much in the last 30 years from where they were before on national security. And watching Trump with Putin especially, but also watching him with China. And you can even get into trade and some of the other issues where Trump's views are anathema to Republican ideology, but particularly national security dealing with Russia. That's the kind of thing where, it enrages me, and not as a partisan, but as an American. I see what he's doing. I see Don Jr. God, I would almost say, for me, the biggest crime of the Trump era, in a way, is Don Jr. saying, I love it when the Russian government says they want to help him win the election, and he accepts. As a former Republican and as a current American, I don't want to downplay anything else that's happened, but that almost is worse than anything, because to me it's treasonous. And the idea of other Republicans not speaking out, what the hell do you think is going on? Why are there not more people? I don't mean like you, where they become Democrats, but where, like David Frum, they just say, what is wrong with you people?
It's funny. There was an item in Axios where Mike Allen had a quote from a senior administration official who expressed their displeasure with what happened with the protesters, and every time
anonymously.
Every time I read those, I think, you chicken shit. Like, if you really are unhappy or uncomfortable with what's happening, then quit and say so. I did it, and it's so I know it's not hard to do that, to do the right thing. And if more people did that, we wouldn't be in the condition that we're in right now in this country. And I am perplexed as to how the Republican Party has allowed Trump to hijack them and turn them into these right-wing conspiracy theory puppets for a foreign country that does not have our best interest at heart.
Yeah.
And
which the Republican Party knows. You don't have to explain to Republicans why Russia and Putin are bad.
Right.
Right.
Well, up until Trump, they were the ones leading the chorus that Russia was bad. They're the ones who would attack President Obama for being
Mitt Romney, 2012.
Right. Romney actually.
He was right. Yeah.
And so that's why I always say, like, I never want to hear the bullshit that the Republican Party is a party of national security. They've sold out our national security. I never want to hear that the Republican Party is the party of pro-life, when they're the ones saying, if 100,000 Americans are dead because of the coronavirus, that's acceptable. That's
why is it happening? Why aren't people speaking out if it's so obvious that these are violations of Republican
Because they don't
ideals?
believe in any actual ideology. They believe in one ideology, and that's the ideology of power. And the rhetoric you have heard from Republicans up until Trump of small government, living within your means, fiscal responsibility, lower deficits, no debt, sanctity of life, every life matters, all that, like, that was all crap. Like, they don't mean that. They're pretending. They're playing their base for a bunch of suckers. The level of disdain, this is the ultimate irony, the level of disdain that these people have for their voters, the way, if the people in middle America only knew how their leaders, how the people that they're wearing their MAGA hats for, how they really feel about them, they'd beat the shit out of them.
Diamond and Silk. You know this. Imagine what most Republicans think of Diamond and Silk.
Right.
You know this.
Come on. So it's really I'll be, one of the most interesting things will be what happens, God willing, that Joe Biden wins. And let's say that Biden wins and the Senate goes with him, that they pick up this, because things are looking really strong, I think, for Democrats in the Senate as well. In places like Arizona, Colorado, North Carolina, Maine, there's a real opportunity for Democrats to take back the Senate.
Even in Georgia, both seats are looking,
and retire Mitch McConnell, hopefully.
Oh God!
What the Republican Party does at that moment will be very telling, because one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to continue to go to the far right and not learn from failure and follow the path of the California Republican Party, or they're going to dump everything associated with the Trump era and try to pretend like it didn't happen. Then you will see people, and this is what I think will happen. You will see people like the Lindsey Grahams, like the Paul Ryans, people who will say, "Well, we privately were trying to stop this. We were trying to, it's gonna turn out that Kellyanne Conway was the anonymous writer of the New York Times op-ed that was lamenting everything happening in the Trump White House. You're going to see people rewrite history and try to make it look like that they were not a part of this. Yeah. And I don't think that's going to work, but it's going to be very entertaining to watch them do those backflips.
Well, no, what they will get away with, I'm sorry, Cliff, one quick second. What they will get away with is they will absolutely accuse President Biden of every single thing Trump did 10 times worse. And with a straight face, they'll do it. And I worry, again, I'm the worrywart of the team here, but I worry they're going to get away with it because generally speaking, I've always had much more admiration for how Republicans message than Democrats.
Oh my God, 1,000%. I bang my head against the wall watching Democrat messaging.
Yes.
It is
Democratic messaging, Kurt.
Oh, yes. God, why that's even a thing, I'll never, that right there tells you.
It's hard to get rid of, I know.
With the Democratic Party.
We had Joe Walsh on, he did it too. It's all good.
He did it, and Kurt
I reminded him too.
Cliff corrected him, and people were like, thank you. I was so upset when I heard that.
Jesus, it's like,
But that's a good example.
If the Democrats had the one thing that gives me heartened is Rick Wilson, Steve Schmidt, George Conway, what they're doing, Project Lincoln, because that's how you message. And I've said this before. It takes some Republicans to beat Republicans.
I was going to say the best Democratic messengers are Republicans, is what you're saying right now.
And thank God they're doing what they're doing because they're showing this is how you beat them. This is how you beat them at their own game.
You take it to them. You don't.
That's what it's going to take. Democrats so often I feel like, and the Democratic primary was a good example of this. The idea that this election is somehow going to actually come down to who's for Medicare for all or not. No, it's not. Yeah. The idea that who has the best plan for 45 different issues matters. Yeah. No, it doesn't. If substance mattered, Donald Trump wouldn't be within smelling distance of the White House, nevertheless living in it right now. Right. Know what you're up against. And it was so frustrating watching the Democratic Party debates because the whole time they're litigating a case against one another that has nothing to do with beating Donald Trump.
Right. I mean, again, in fairness, I get why people were so, I would say, anal about Medicare for all, because, you do want the best proposal to win. I mean, on gay rights, LGBT rights, I would push for my proposal, and I didn't like people watering it down. So I get that. But as you said, I've always felt that Americans, put aside the left, Americans tend to vote for the guy, and it's the guy they like, the guy they want to have a beer with, the guy they want to go fishing with, and against the woman they hate. But I mean, it's pretty simple primal instincts here.
But I'll tell you, the interesting thing that's also not being, I think, calculated for as people look at 2020 is there were, for better or worse, a lot of people who voted for Trump because they just couldn't stand the thought of voting for Hillary Clinton.
Correct.
There's no doubt.
And the level of hatred, and being former Republicans, this, the level of hatred for the Clintons is very real and visceral within the Republican Party. And
that's not her fault.
And 30 years of Vince Foster messaging and all that.
And let's be clear too. Look, Hillary Clinton didn't do herself any favors there either. Frankly, I mean, I'll say without question, the investigation of Benghazi was all bullshit. I mean, that it was all political messaging, but nobody forced her to have a private email server in her basement.
Well, and she gave shitty answers on it is the bigger problem. Because
how they did not put that to bed.
The Bush White House did it, but she didn't sit here and go, you know what? Yeah, I'm as guilty as Colin Powell in the Bush White House.
Right.
She never, my concern with Hillary, not to relitigate that, was I think she would have, somebody told me the other day, she would have been an amazing president, but I don't think she was a great candidate. I don't think she spoke well publicly, and I don't think she was able to. Elizabeth Warren, God bless her, I love Elizabeth Warren, has this problem too. She has a hard time taking bullshit scandals thrown against her and concisely telling you it's bullshit and putting it to bed.
Well, look how hard it was for Warren to deal with the stupid Pocahontas crap.
That's what I'm saying. It's bullshit, but she never was able to.
Nope.
She looked uncomfortable discussing it.
And the thing that always perplexed me about the Clinton thing was the first time that, and I can say this because I was there, we sent at the Oversight Committee a letter to her about the email stuff. It was in 2013. It was 3 years before she was going to be the nominee.
Right.
How between that time, if you know you're going to run for president, which she of course did, how do you not put that to bed? But it's like, I mean, come on. So I always say it's like part of this was the ineptitude of the campaign, we'll say.
Yeah. Although I don't want to get on too long about the problems of 2016. But I mean,
but my point being that those problems and that visceral, I think, hatred that the party had for Hillary, that does not exist for Joe Biden.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
Biden is not going to have that barrier. As I said when we started this conversation, Biden comes off as genuine and authentic and likable. Even if you hate every policy he ever talks about, you still like the guy.
Right. I think a lot of it's sort of the compassion that that comes from him is quite obvious. He seems like a regular guy.
Joe Biden is the only Democrat I've ever heard any Republicans say, "I'd vote for him."
Yep.
He just it's a different ball game with him.
Explain to people on the left why what you just said now is not obscene. I'm quite serious. I think there will be some supporters of some candidates who say that's exactly the problem with Joe Biden, that he's a Democrat Republicans would vote for.
Yeah, and whoever says that should never be involved in professional politics, because it's shocking as it may to believe at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is who can get 50+1, if you will, who can get the most votes. And I'm for the candidate that can get as many votes from all places as possible. And I've always said you can't beat something with nothing. If you don't give disaffected Republicans someone to take a look at, if you don't at least try to reach out to them, then you are giving them no choice but to vote for Donald Trump. You have got to give them an alternative. And it was, during the Democratic nomination process, the only two candidates that I felt spoke to those people were Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg. And they understand, when you look at, as much as I wish as it was the case, presidential elections aren't popularity contests. It's not who gets the most votes. If that were, Hillary Clinton would be president right now. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. It's who can put together the electoral coalition, and particularly who can do well in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida. And when I look at the electoral map and you look at who those voters are, who those constituencies are, you're going to have to reach out to some white working class voters. That's just the electoral reality.
Well, Biden won a lot of those folks disproportionately. Like you saw in primaries, he did so well in some of those rural areas. And I get it. Those are Democrats voting. But some of those were switchover votes too.
Right. And there's a reason why, frankly, Barack Obama put Joe Biden on the ticket in 2008. Being the first black president, a situation where more than in any time in our history, the color of the candidate's skin was going to be one of the first two things you thought about when you cast your vote at your ballot at the voting office there. And having Biden on the ticket because he plays well in those key states made a difference, and they won twice. It's like, of all the people running for office, Biden gets to say, I know what it takes to win presidential elections, because he was on the ticket for two successful ones. No one else can say that.
I've said this as a while, and I'll just say again quickly. I mean, look, I live in Cincinnati. So, I think I can speak to it, which is there's a suburban, Procter & Gamble type moderate Republican that Biden appeals to, while at the same time appealing to some of these voters we lost that are white, working class, rural. I mean, he does. He has a wide appeal, and I think that's going to be hugely helpful. It's the reason why right now Ohio's a swing state again, quite frankly.
And let's be clear, too. It is very easy, I think, for white voters to feel just alienated from the political process right now, especially in the context of these conversations we're having about race. And because the people who have perpetrated some of these horrific acts are white, you have to have a candidate who can also reach out to white people and invite them to be a part of the solution to some of the things that we're talking about right now. Right. And I think Biden understands, again, his speech did that, and he talked about healing, and he talked about solutions and coming together to create a better world for everybody of all, creeds, colors, etc. And that's just an important component to, I think, what it's going to be to be uniquely to defeat Donald Trump. Any other election, it would be very different, and Biden wouldn't even be the nominee, in my opinion, if it weren't for this particular moment in time.
Yep.
But but Republicans have traditionally been very, very good at messaging to white voters. There's a reason for that, we all know. But Democrats can't just, again, abandon them and not give them a reason to show up and vote. Because if they do, they'll lose. We saw that. I mean, that's what happened in 2016. We can't have that happen again.
Right. I mean, I've argued for a long time. The only thing is, I don't have data backing it up, but I had wished that the candidates had focused more on simply, it's not just time for a change, it's time for an adult to enter the room. And aren't you just sick of all of this? And it's just sick of the anger, sick of, forget even now, sick of the riots, not the riots, but I mean, the police brutality, sick of the economy crashing, sick of the disease, but just
coronavirus. That's why my whole thing at this point is just the tagline should simply be something along the lines of "had enough."
Well, that's what I mean. But even before,
you want more Twitter rants, you want more coronavirus.
Correct. And actually, you know what, Cliff? You and I were saying that a year ago. And this is another Republican messaging point. You hit a point again and again and again, and guess what? If you keep talking about it every day, once every 3 months, some disaster is going to pop up that reinforces your point. So we've been saying for a year, haven't you
with Trump, it's more like once every 2 weeks. So,
but the messaging point, haven't you had enough? Then it would have been, oh my God, the virus. Then it would have been all the racism and the violence. All of this would have fed into a larger, and Biden, for me,
you create a narrative structure with your messaging, and then you fit everything into it.
But ironically, that for me is it's the economy, stupid. I've just had enough, and I mean also just fatigue of the Trump childish bullshit. And Biden today, I tried to think of any other. Honestly, him being an old white man was perfect for the day.
Right.
Because it was
funny.
But I also say that as a white guy, it was this grandfatherly figure that was like, and I literally was like, oh my God.
It's like an Eisenhower where you're like, you feel kind of.
Right. Well, and Biden, of course, has a unique credibility having been Barack Obama's vice president. And so he can be kind of the old white guy saying these things because he was the vice president, the first black president we've ever had in our country. Right. But you're right about again, I said this the other week on TV. When I think about Donald Trump and the Republican Party, I think of, build the wall, Hillary's emails, drain the swamp, blame China. Very concise, often repeated. Forget about whether it's true or not or any of that.
Right.
That's what that party is in 3 words or less.
Yep.
When I think about the Biden campaign and the Democrat Party, I don't know what those 3 words are. It could be enough is enough, had enough. It could be no more fear. Whatever you come up with, but they got to have something because it is, from just a purely operative perspective. You gotta tell people, what you're for. They gotta know what they're buying into, and they gotta have a theme. I mean, like any good movie, television show, song, like there's got to be a story that your audience is buying into and rallying around.
And you need to be able to get them to think of that story by saying a couple words, right? It should elicit, like any good brand, the few words needs to elicit that emotional reaction.
I've always said, if you've ever watched, WWE, and watch, it's like, I always, if I ran a candidate school, I would make every single candidate running for any office watch old promos from The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and watch how when they say one word, 20,000 people in the arena finish that sentence because they know those catchphrases.
Right.
That's messaging.
Yep. You kind of scaring me here because I hadn't thought about that with Biden. During 2016, I remember a reporter friend telling me, I know what Trump's for. As you said, it's the wall. It's the anti-Muslim thing. It was actually anti-Muslim and the wall were the 2 big ones, and drain the swamp, like you said. With Hillary, there were 10,000 proposals. And I mentioned this to Hillary people. They go, that's not true. She was for this and this and this. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, even I who work this, even top reporters I was talking to who were friends, who were smart people, they couldn't quite mention the 2 or 3 things. And I hadn't thought about it, but you're right. With Biden, and honestly, the other candidates too. I love Elizabeth Warren. There were 10,000 things. And people disagree with me. Say, no, Warren's for inequality across the board. There isn't really a soundbite there. And Biden doesn't have a soundbite. Now, I fear that the Biden folks probably worry that simply saying a return to normalcy or haven't you had enough isn't positive enough of an agenda.
Right.
And certainly on the left,
but you can do more than one thing. And as Kurt was saying, the wall, and they had lock her up, and they had
it's
like you can have a couple things, and that's what they need to do. Right. They need I think anything that gets at stability, that gets at compassion, and gets at experience. And you may want different words and whatever, but they really should those 3 things should be the the positives they should
Right.
you should get.
And and everyone associated with the campaign, every surrogate, every elected official, endorser needs to repeat those 2 or 3 catchphrases.
Yes,
really,
we can.
as much as hope and change.
Right.
Yes, we
but,
can.
But you're right. I mean, you're right though. That's the Obama, and we remember it 12 years later. Biden and
Hell, Bush,
right.
compassionate conservatism. I mean, like whatever it is, you got to have that. HW, 1,000 points of light. It's just these things are there, and it's such a central component from a messaging standpoint, from an image, from a theme, to connect with voters. And again, it's like just watch old WWE promos, man. They whether it's the Undertaker saying "Rest in peace" or The Rock saying "Do you smell what the Rock is cooking?" Like it's there. Like
I didn't actually realize that they had all slogans and things. I don't watch, but
it's one of the. I started watching some of this stuff and trying to figure out the Trump presidency, and remembering Trump did this story arc with WWE back in the day. And I remember his convention speech when he walked out and had this backdrop and music and this dramatic. And it was like straight out of a WWE WrestleMania entrance, right? Everything you need to know about Donald Trump is literally explained by watching Monday Night Raw. Right. In my opinion, he is a character who is delivering promos about beating his other guy into submission, and I mean that. It's for the Trump presidency is basically the World Wrestling Entertainment put on steroids, given nuclear launch codes.
Yep. And they're memorable, by the way.
They are. And
maybe it's why Linda McMahon understands him so well and is such a big supporter.
Right. I mean, his former secretary of small business there. And so I think that's something that Democrats don't do well, and in contemporary times, and haven't really tapped into, and they need to, of just basic messaging, understanding Trump's psyche about this. If you go into it knowing Trump thinks he's a WWE superstar, that's what you're up against. That's what you're dealing with on a debate stage, in speeches, at rallies. That in his mind, he's playing a WWF superstar. Okay. That's how you can figure out how to deconstruct him and beat him. Not by throwing out 45, 20-page policy papers. That's just not going to get it done.
I like that. I may be teaching a class in the fall in political communications. I may have to show people like WWE stuff. I'll give you full credit, Kurt, if I do that.
You can put a great reel together of WWE superstars screaming their slogans, interwoven with Trump screaming his slogans at rallies. Right. It'll sound the same.
Right.
I bet. That's really fascinating. It's a great point.
Kurt, I know we're hitting up, I think you've given us more time than you promised. Got any sort of maybe final thoughts on the news of the day, maybe is the way to close. And then Cliff and I are going to continue.
I just think that as a Democrat, as someone who obviously wants this national nightmare to finally stop, I think the most important thing for everyone to understand is, as bad as things look, and as bad as it looks every day on the news, there is another side to that story. What we're not seeing enough of are the law enforcement officials who are taking a knee with protesters. What we're not seeing enough of are, like in Nashville, when the police arrested this 25-year-old white kid who set a fire to a historic building. The police department tweeted out his arrest, and made it very clear who was behind that. For every act of violence and unrest we're seeing right now, there are 50 acts of kindness and generosity and compassion that are being demonstrated right now as well. And that's the real American spirit, that in the midst of a protest and unrest, if you actually stop and look around, you see people trying to help one another and to protect one another. And that always gives me optimism. I always look for those moments when I'm watching coverage. And even when you start seeing the smoke coming in and the rubber bullets flying, you always see someone trying to shield somebody else and taking someone to run with them and looking out for someone. And that's America, in my opinion. That's the best of America. And I think that there's more of them than there are of the Trumps and the disruptors and the racists. And I do think that at the end of the day, that's going to win the day in November.
I like it. I endorse this message, everyone.
No, that was great. Thanks, Kurt. Yeah, all right. I'm feeling a little better.
Thanks so much, man.
Between you and Biden this morning, my mood has lifted.
Well, thanks, guys, for having me on. I appreciated you reaching out to me, and I'm glad we got to do this. Hopefully, we'll get to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Someday
Thanks for being here, man.
Yep.
All right, take care.
Bye, Kurt.
You too.
All right, Kurt's got it. There we go. And Cliff and I are still here. So, so the Biden stuff this morning, I mean, it God knows it made me feel better.
Powerful as hell.
I've been feeling just awful the last few days. Everything's been freaking me out. We had an incident in front of my place with some guys with sledgehammers who attacked the grocery store.
Well, obviously that's a little personally scary too.
But I'm saying, like, that got me even more revved up, and then seeing the violence out there. And honestly, the last couple of months of coronavirus, I've already been anxiety ridden. Cliff and I have talked on the show, not being able to sleep at night and waking up 3 hours before and rolling in bed. And then this week, and Biden was like just what I needed. It was just,
but you're in a way, you're speaking to the perfection of that message. And again, I do think in the sense that, like, you need something to make you feel better, to make you feel like we're going to get out of this, to make you think we're going to be at least somewhat more united again, that we're going to end some of, to quote somebody, the American carnage, and Biden gave you that feeling, which means he did a great job. I mean, again, I agree with Kurt, and I think it will be coming. I hope so anyhow, where there'll be a couple of these slogans and catchphrases that to use. But at least in general, the sense, you said normalcy. I wrote a piece for the New York Daily News on that, how he should run that kind of a campaign. Right. I mean, I'm not saying use that word. I would go, again, to me, the contrast between him and Trump that are most effective are stability, because you're basically telling people Trump is crazy, which he is, and you want that experience because Trump's completely incompetent, doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Compassionate, because Trump's a sociopath. I might add a fourth one, trustworthy, because Trump's an out liar. And you find ways within those four words to come up with 2 or 3 catchphrases that are positive for you, I think, and then you have to have your 1 or 2 negative catchphrases. I think even had enough, maybe use one of them and you find another one. Unfit or whatever it is. And, you run with those, and those should always signal to people the broader themes. But again, I think I watched most of it this morning before I had to shower and get ready because I was going to be appearing in person on our podcast. But I thought it was an incredible speech. So kudos to them. Yeah.
No, but it is funny though. I mean, I'm glad Kurt mentioned that about the messaging, because I honestly hadn't quite thought of that we still don't have sound bites. And I think it's important Kurt mentioned it too, because I think even when Kurt was talking, I was agreeing with him and I was already thinking of people listening and going, what do you mean it's bad to have proposals? What do you mean it's bad? As I jumped in and said, what do you mean it's bad to care which healthcare proposal we get? That's not really the point. The point is, if you want to win elections, you need to think of how you win elections, and that's with messaging, which is the point you and I always bring back.
And also, again, it's not an either or. So the whole thing you should be doing, I mean, Trump even did that with his stupid wall thing. But the whole thing you should be doing is communicating what your policies are through these taglines, because you'll be making it clear to people like what it is that you want to do if it's really good. So it's not that you shouldn't have policy proposals. It's that you shouldn't all the time be listing what your policy proposals are. You should have the shorthand of your branding and your messaging to explain.
The deep state.
Yeah, there would be an example of something.
Trump takes every example practically of criminal malfeasance he's done, and whenever he gets called out on it, whether it's inspectors general, whether it's Comey, whether it's Mueller, it's the deep state, right? I mean, but that's an example of what you're saying, where you get these uber concepts that you then tie everything into fake news. Part of the reason it's worked is he keeps saying it for every occasion. And it also is a really good overarching topic to explain any time a newspaper exposes something he did, it's fake news. So it's and again, you don't be dishonest like they are, but they're very good at this. It's very good at the messaging. It's really,
but
Biden
also works when,
well, it also works when what?
I said also works when you have more simple minds and you don't have an interest in creating policy. So all you do is spend all your time creating slogans. And we want to create policy.
Yeah.
Right. We want to create policy too. It's just, it's not like either or. It's you can actually create good policy and then explain it to people in simple terms that brand who you are and what you stand for.
Yeah.
That's what we should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I also think there is not a problem, but there is a difference where I think the left, and when I say the left, I mean the left of liberal Democrats, whatever term you want to use, we like details more, right? Now, I must admit,
we have this strange attraction to reading. Yes.
Well, no, but quite seriously, though, I mean, like, one thing I liked about Pete Buttigieg were these overarching themes and that he would present. It made me, this sort of Americana. Something about it was very heartwarming to me. And I don't know, a president who's thinking about, I don't know what it was. And some of the criticisms of Buttigieg, however, from people where they felt he wasn't detailed enough. So clearly, I'm also one of these people where even though I want details, I want a figurehead.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And he definitely fits into the more, and Biden, frankly, did that today as well. Biden really did the pathos, whatever you want to call it, the empathy.
There was good language in that.
He looked like a fucking president today.
He did.
And Trump never does. It was very, but talking a little bit more about last night, Cliff, because and what's funny too, it almost, today, I forget what it was, the Secret Service or the Park Service or Park Service, I think, put out a statement saying, oh no, when we cleared that church yesterday, it had nothing to do with Trump coming in half an hour. Now,
that's what I can't say either, is how much he corrupts everybody else around him. It makes them lie for him.
Yeah. Now let's just,
the Park Service are troops that belong to our government.
Yeah.
Our federal
not
government.
Troops, but yeah.
Not troops, okay. But
they do have police, but they do have police, yeah.
They're police that belong to our federal government, and so he used federal government resources to attack and disperse an innocent group of, a peaceful group of people who were protesting him. There was no threat, there was no anything. He wanted to walk to the church for his photo op, and I'm sure he also wanted to have images of him attacking protesters because he does think that'll work for him. And quite frankly, it probably does have the best chance of working for him because nothing else will.
Right.
And so he has to divide to have even a shot. So, it was all just so disgusting. And again, every once in a while, I just get this feeling like that feeling like from what you learn history in school and whatever, and you're taught about like this sort of disgustingness of fascism, where something feels like, where you start having that feeling in the pit of your stomach, like this isn't what you do in a democracy. And using federal police to clear a park so that he could take a photo op and potentially injuring or killing people. I don't think anybody was killed. Right. I'm not sure if anybody was seriously injured, but they could have been. To do that, it's such an unbelievable abuse of power. It deserves impeachment in and of itself.
Right. Just real quick though, the one point I wanted to make too was just as you and me both being insiders on this, it's an outright. We know it is a lie that when the Park Service says we didn't clear it because Trump was going to speak.
Right.
When a president is going to arrive at an event. I went to see Bill Clinton speak at Howard University when he was president. We had to get there 2 hours early because they had the entire event venue locked down. Nobody could come in. Nobody could come. They said, if you're not there 2 hours before his speech, the doors are locked closed. If the president is going to be in public on a street corner,
the Secret Service preps everything. So does the,
and they prep it. Well, no, they prep it way in advance. And if you're doing it in a time where there are A, protests, and B, there's been violence, blame the far right, blame whoever you want, but there's been violence. And frankly, somebody lit that church on fire last night, and it could have been far right provocateurs, but you're putting him in a place where somebody tried to commit arson. You are going to sweep that area before he comes. So even if they claim, well, at 6:30, we didn't sweep the area with violence because Trump was speaking at 7, at 6:35, they would have had to sweep the area with violence because Trump was coming at 7. Like,
that's correct.
They're outright lying about their own procedure. And I wish to some degree somebody could go back to the Park Service and say, no, you know what? I've got my camera on in front of you, Mr. Park Service head. You explain to me. So you're saying you wouldn't have cleared the area at all for the president to walk there at 7 o'clock? Really? And watch him.
In other words, you're a liar.
He's lying. He's lying about the procedure, and it's a Trump quality lie because it's such a clear lie on its face that even the procedures contradict what he's claiming. It's not just we know in our gut he's lying. They would have had to clear the area if the president's going there, and they would have gotten violent with people because they would have said we're not leaving.
Yes.
You know,
It's just it's
but
very
he corrupts
straightforward.
everything. He corrupts everything.
He does, because he
You know?
threatens people and makes everybody lie for him, and then
Well,
they have to think about, do they want to lose their job and their pension and their this and their that? Is it worth it? You know, I mean, he's just an awful human.
Well, and I
being.
think God, he did a bad job of it. I think, ironically for Trump, he did a shitty job. He talked to the Rose Garden, and that's kind of what he wanted, though. I think Trump wanted to talk in the Rose Garden, and they did split screens on TV. And, you know, you and I'm sure you predicted it in your own head when it was going. I did in mine, and Trump's people did too. They're going to be showing us, and then they're going to show these guys beating up the protesters. And you're going to talk about law and order, and it's going to be great. America's streets are carnage. I'm there to help, right? Well, but then he goes to the church, and like we said, he totally blew it. He went for the photo op. He didn't say, he did, not only did he not pray, not only did not talk about the arson,
Right.
He literally didn't say anything. He gave no speech. He didn't even do questions with reporters. He just got there, stood in front of the church, and the church was boarded up.
Held a Bible like it was a dirty diaper and like took a picture with
Held a Bible, didn't mention why he was holding a Bible. And actually,
with all the other white people in his administration.
Well, right. Cliff, okay, all the white people. And what he also fucked up was they were literally on the steps of the church. So the picture frame was Trump and half a doorway with wood on it.
Yeah, you couldn't see the church. I know. Yeah, that's what was hilarious.
They should have been, I don't know, 15, 20 feet further in front, away from the church. So then people would have been
they
like,
don't prep anything. There's no advance for them. Like,
I don't know.
It's not a professional organization. It's what he's always been. But it's an amateur ad hoc, you know, from 1 minute to the next. Yeah. That's this whole life.
Literally the Bible thing. I mean, the Bible thing was literally, you know, this is my modern, by the way, great book for learning Greek. But this is my Trump holding the Bible like this. And they're like, and my favorite was when they said, oh, is that your Bible? And he goes, it's a Bible.
A Bible was what he said.
Well, again, and the response is,
because clearly it's not his.
But again, that fucking reporter clip, the response is, oh, why didn't you bring your Bible?
Yeah, of course.
No, he'd make up some lie about it, but he doesn't have a Bible. I would have said, oh, that's interesting. When we get back to the White House, can we see your Bible? That would be a really neat photo op.
I know, really.
Watch him, and he's going to bring it and say, now, by the way, then he'd have a Bible in his hand, saying it's his, and it'd say, great, can I see the first page where it says property of or whatever? No.
They never, of course, they don't call him on anything
freaking
like
liar. That. But to hold the Bible like this, like it's, you know, burning his, of course it probably was burning his hands, but, you know.
Yes.
Unbelievable. But what else? We're going to have to do another ad really quick, which, by the way, kind of screwed up a little, folks. I apologize. We wanted to make this one of our premium episodes, and the premium episodes mean we got to do all the ads in the first part, and we didn't do. So this is going to be another. This is going to. Well, but I apologize because I don't want the Zoom. Let me put it this way: the Zoom episodes make it a lot. Are for you guys, the subscribers, and it makes it a lot harder to do the ads and cut them out and do only tidbits for the public when we do Zoom. So I think when we do Zoom, it's going to be a little more public-y. So I apologize for that. I mean, meaning not just putting it behind the firewall. There's nothing. Now, I don't know, anything else, Cliff, in the news? The thing is that obviously this is, you know, well, yeah, we hit 100,000 people with coronavirus. I mean, obviously got blown out of
and that was a big story, and then, of course, got pushed out by some of this stuff.
You know, and I do worry. I will say, I do worry. I wasn't worrying the first couple of days until somebody mentioned it, maybe 2 nights ago. I hope to God that with the protests, we're not just spreading the virus further. I'm hoping that everything being public and it being warm out, that maybe we get lucky. You know, but it's got me scared. That's another.
I think with it. You know? Yeah, I do worry. I mean, again, all of these protests. I get
whether necessary.
Oh, it's not. I'm not questioning whether.
But I wasn't worried about the health aspects until a couple of days ago when somebody actually, real quick, I'm sorry, but somebody had said to me, "Hey, why aren't you going down there?" And it was a day that was really hot as hell, and we hadn't had as much violence yet. And I just said, you know, it's a really shitty day, and I can't Uber down anymore because I'm afraid of using Ubers with the virus. So it's really a hell of a walk. And then the next day, somebody mentioned to me the virus, and I went, oh God, I wasn't even thinking about that. I don't want to be. And then we started.
I can't balance all the damn, you know.
Well, and then we started having the police violence, and then I started thinking, holy shit, I don't want to get beaten up. And with my asthma, the last thing, I can't even imagine what tear gas would do to asthma. Yeah, so then I got scared about the whole thing and said, all right, I'm not going down there to take pictures, even though I really wanted to go cover it.
It's a risk.
You know?
I mean, that's the thing, you know.
Anyway, I know, nothing we can do about it.
There's nothing we can do. I mean, I hope it seemed like at least where I was seeing most protesters were wearing masks.
There've been a lot of
course, there were some people that weren't, you know, and I hope because that's the most dangerous. Outdoors, at least, is good.
Yeah.
But when you're up close to somebody and screaming and yelling, that's when you're more likely to have droplets.
Well, and you're touching each other, you're jostling, you're helping your person, and you're touching. And even though they said touching is as much transmission, it's still, we're going to see. I read something about in China, only 2% of the cases might have been transmissible by touch. So, we can hope.
And very few of them were outdoors.
Outside. Yeah, very few outdoors. So anyway, we'll hope. There's nothing we can do about it, but it's just something I started worrying about, and obviously with the virus overall, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, all of this worries me because now I'm worried about the economy too, because even like in DC, the businesses are shut down. A lot of businesses are shut down preemptively too. I was walking around because I had to go to my allergy shot yesterday. So I saw a lot of places that were looted, but also a lot of places that just have put up planking just to protect their businesses because they don't want to get looted or broken down or broken into, whatever. And, we just started opening up with our own phase one with outdoor restaurants and things like that. And it worries me too, because I worry about the economic impact of all of this, especially to the places that get looted. And I hate to keep bringing it up, but it's 200 jobs go on at a shot for a lot of these businesses. And it just,
no, I know.
It's again, not saying the
sometimes
protest
there's
shouldn't
no
happen.
good answers.
That's what I mean. There's just no good answer. It's heightening my anxiety about so much going wrong right now.
I understand that.
That I would feel better about, not better about the protest, but I'd feel better if at least it also weren't scaring me about the pandemic and the economy. It's like we've had a quadruple whammy of bad shit going on, and they're all reinforcing each other. And frankly,
and being that it's Donald Trump, there's no reason to think.
Yeah.
Right. Being that it's him, there's no reason to think that won't turn into a quintuple or a sextuple.
Yep. Well, too, by the way, a Democratic White House wouldn't have, caved to protesters. A Democratic White House would have, and Trump, by the way, they even claimed they were going to investigate the George Floyd killing, which ironically that didn't even resonate, but not ironically, it didn't resonate because it's Donald Trump. And frankly,
because he said things left and right that he never follows up on.
That's what I mean.
He never in some ways, when he says bad shit, like he said last night about sending federal troops in, the only thing we have going for us is he's too lazy to do the things he actually threatens to do.
Well, and even last night, I'm really curious if Trump can give them orders like that. Can he? Can he give them orders and say, forget him going to the church. I don't want them there. Push them back 3 blocks.
If the governors and mayors don't cooperate, it's very dicey as to whether he can do it legally.
DC though, where he's got
DC is different. Right?
He's got the park police. He's got the Secret Service.
DC is not a state. That's the problem. Not being a full state, you don't have the rights, which is bullshit. And of course,
but to have a president literally decide the tactics on the ground. Again, forget about him going to the church. Literally say, you know what? I don't like it. I want them back 3 blocks, them back 4 blocks, and I want you to use tear gas. First of all, I'm sure Nixon is another story, but it hasn't happened with any president probably in 4 decades, 5 decades. Whereas with him, I'm sure he'd be glad to do it. And in the end, these agency heads would do it. Which is the problem going forward. He's going to just say, he's going to love it. And actually talk about wag the dog. Like you said, he's going to want more violence because he thinks it's
he likes it. He's a sociopath. He enjoys it. He gets this. He's like a torture porn guy. He gets this weird thrill. God, you hear it when he announces those troops ran into the fire and they're getting torn apart. And he's just a very sick individual.
I don't know if you saw Rick Grinnell was arguing with what's her face, who's really
Swalwell. Swalwell just fucking owned him.
Oh, I saw Jackie Kucinich. What did he do with Swalwell?
Oh, I didn't see that. Swalwell just kicked his ass. Go find it. It was all him trying to deny, that anything had been done wrong with respect to Flynn. And Swallow's
that is. I did see
when you took over the job, you said you were going to release the call transcripts, and you haven't done it. So clearly, and all Grinnell could do is just be his defensive dick self. Like he had nothing.
He's a Twitter troll.
Nothing.
I mean, I know him. He's a Twitter troll.
I know. They took a Twitter troll, made him ambassador to one of the most important
Rick
countries.
Rick Grinnell is Don Jr. with a a bigger
right. And they turned him into an ambassador to one of the most important countries and the head of intelligence in the interim.
Which is even
a Twitter troll.
Ambassadorial job. Yeah. I mean, it's criminal. It's just part of the crime. And it takes us back to that discussion, which we can close soon, but it takes us back to that discussion of Biden doesn't have a choice but to focus on the kleptocracy when he comes in. And it's not just the kleptocracy, because it's not just about Trump qua Trump, as we say in the law, meaning his own crimes.
Right.
We have seen so many flaws. I'm not even getting into police brutality flaws. I'm talking way more larger systemic flaws in that somebody can so abuse the system. And the police brutality.
That's correct. I mean, even like the things that one might consider smaller things, the Hatch Act, for example. Like, they've never been prosecuted. They've ignored it like it doesn't exist. They send out political stuff on the White House Twitter account. They've got people acting in their formal roles for the president, saying political things. I mean, it's a constant. And they never once. So, I mean, the whole point is if you never enforce that, then people are never going to listen to it.
Nothing's been enforced. Nothing's been enforced
these laws
on anything.
They have to be made tougher. They have to be made almost automatic. They have to. I mean, there's. It's not just the police that needs reform. The Justice Department needs enormous reform.
Well,
I mean, you know,
and you know what?
We've got a lot ahead of us.
And let me put a finer point on it, Cliff. You know, clearly, people are very worried now about what's coming next, not just for Trump's violence, but also, you know, a literal. God, it sounds crazy. Don Lemon said it last night, but a dictatorship taking over. I mean, I believe that was the word he used. Like, I feel stupid almost using the word because it seems so anathema to what it means to be an American, right? It's crazy. Oh, this is cute. You know, it's anathema that. Sorry, I was getting a call on the phone and it distracted me. I hate that. The dictatorship Trump. Oh yeah, it is clear to us that Trump could go much further than this and still get away with it.
That is correct.
And what worries me then is what kind of laws do you put in place to stop that from happening? That's what I need Biden to do. Even if it isn't throwing Trump in jail, it is, we now see what Trump could be. I mean, we
now see what Tom Cotton or Liz Cheney or some of these other ghouls could be in the future.
Yes.
Who clearly aspire to be president.
And that's what I mean where I'm saying it's not just about throwing Trump in jail as Trump. It's we see how he could become a violent dictatorship. I know, folks, you're saying he already is. That's not my point is literally Eastern European Soviet dictatorship. We see how it could happen. And I want to know what kind of laws can be put in place to stop that from happening. That is something Joe Biden has to do, even if he feels like he can't do the prosecuting the Trump family, prosecuting Bill Barr aspect of it. He's got to look at how do we literally save America? And it's not just going to be healing race relations. That's part of it. It's literally this. We got to find a phrase for it. Click. I was going to say the dictatorship part, but we need a phrase for it of defining how we never let anybody do this. It's never again is the phrase used for the Holocaust and World War II, and the Russians use it as well, I believe, for the way they got it. Once they became anti-Nazi, they were pro-Nazi to the beginning.
Well, we have to find something like that.
Because and actually branding wise, Cliff, we don't want it to sound like we're talking about just vindictiveness.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
It has to be. It doesn't mean you ignore all they've done. I think they need to be prosecuted.
How do we save democracy in this country so that it never happens again? So that nobody pushes us this close to losing our democracy, and the rest of us literally sit here and go, "I don't even know what the fuck to do." Short of rioting in the streets, what the fuck do you do to fight this guy? That's also not healthy in a democracy, because then, as a friend of mine was telling me yesterday, who knows a lot about Latin America. You know this as well from your international relations studies. When you don't give people, and this applies to also the race issue and everything else, when you don't give people an outlet, and frankly, this could even apply to the far right and those guys too. When people feel politically that they have no outlet for their concerns, they resort to violence because there's nothing else.
That's correct.
That you
the
don't
whole
have
point of democracy is that you include everybody and there's ballots instead of bullets.
Yep, and it gives you an outlet for your concerns.
Well, I mean, when people feel they have no other recourse to have anything addressed, they'll get desperate.
Whether they're good people or bad people,
No, good people get desperate too. If you're hungry, whatever. In any case,
okay.
I've said all that I have on my mind.
I did too. That was a good. I'm looking here. That was a good hour and a half, possibly, and even with the ads. Yeah. But I think we're good. What's today? Tuesday. Okay. Yeah. So we'll, again, as usual, we'll do Thursday or Friday. I don't know. Maybe we'll do one of our regular podcasts.
A couple folks who we could probably book.
Oh, good.
So we'll talk about it.
Okay, this was good though. Yeah, no, I always wanted to
I think would be perfect actually for the moment. So,
well, actually, that's a very good question. We'll talk offline because it might be interesting to see if we can get somebody who's exactly timely for the moment. Oh, actually, you know what? And David Frum has a new book, Trumpocalypse, that is quite interesting.
We have to have him on at some point.
Well, we should get him on. He's been quite interesting analyzing the current moment on TV the last few days.
But I also like to hear from some of my former friends, who obviously enjoy having David Frum on our show so much.
Yeah, so they can all get upset at the fact that I'm the one who actually brought David into the show and that Cliff is blamed for being his best friend.
I know, it's awesome. Owning the left.
Oh, well, what do you do?
In any case, I'll talk to you, but I've got one or two people that are absolutely perfect for right now.
Okay, good. All right, guys. Then we're going to sign off. I'm going to, in a couple hours, well, not a couple hours. You'll be seeing this once it's done anyway. So I'm going to have some food because that damn Omaha Steaks commercial got me like, so I want some meat now.
Me too. I need to go eat. So
go turn on the TV and make sure the world hasn't ended yet.
Right. That's important because then there's no point really editing the podcast.
That's the good thing. You always find a rainbow in the darkness.
The glass is half full.
The glass is half full. The world might have ended. Hey, don't have to edit.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening.